Okay, so now we're going to look at class inheritance, which I think you'll find much easier than doing it with constructors and prototypes. And the reason for that is a lot of stuff is abstracted with classes. You don't have to worry about dealing with the prototypes and all that. It's done behind the scenes. With that said, I think it's still good to know what's going on under the hood. That's why I wanted to show you both ways. So let's go ahead and create a shape class. I'm going to do the same thing we did before and just have shape, and that's going to take in a name. So we want a constructor that takes in a name, and then we want to assign that to the name property. So this dot name equals name. And then if we want to inherit a class, we need to extend it. So we can say class rectangle, and we're going to use the extends keyword and then the shape class. Okay, just having this does a lot behind the scenes. So now we want to obviously have a constructor here because a rectangle is going to have a name, width, and a height. So let's pass in name, width, and height into the constructor. And then of course we set the height. So let's say height equals the height that's passed in, and the width is going to equal this dot width equals the width that's passed in. Now for the name, we have a name in the class that we're extending. So what we can do is call a method called super. And what this does is it calls the constructor of the parent class. So this right here is going to call this. Now it needs to have a name, so that's where we pass in name right here. All right, so just keep that in mind. Whenever you extend a class, you want to call super and pass in any arguments that it's going to take in for these properties. So now if I create a rectangle, let's say const rect equals a new rectangle, and we'll pass in, let's say, name of rect1 and 20 and 20. All right, if I console log that, you see we have a rectangle object. We have the name, we have the height, the width, and if we look at the prototype, we have the rectangle class as our constructor. So let's say that I want to have, just like we did before, we'll have a log name method on shape, and we want to be able to use that in any child classes, or I should say subclasses. This is a subclass. Okay, so subclass and parent class. So let's put a method on this called log name, and we just want this to do a console log of the name. So we'll say let's say shape name, and then we'll concatenate on this dot name. So now if we come down here where we already created our rectangle, and let's say console log. Actually, we don't need to do a console log because we're doing it from the method. So let's say rect dot log name, and we get shape name rect1. So it just works. There's no extra steps or anything like that, which is nice. Now if we wanted to create another shape, let's take this and let's paste that in. Let's say this is going to be circle. It's going to extend shape. It's going to take in a name and a radius. We want to call super name, but we only have radius to add here. So we're going to say this dot radius equals radius. And now if I come down and create, let's say const sir, and we'll call it sir, and we'll set it equal to new circle. It's going to take in a name and radius, and then I should be able to say sir.log name, and there we go. And we can overwrite log name, so another example of polymorphism. So if I want to come down to circle and put in a log name here, and we'll do a console log, and instead of shape name we'll say circle name, and then concatenate onto that this dot name. So now if I save that, we get circle name. So we can easily overwrite any methods we have in the parent class. And if we look at the rectangle prototype, you can see it's using the shape prototype, and it's using the rectangle constructor, and that inherits this object prototype, which uses the shape constructor, and that's where the log name is. So that's why we can use rectangle or rect.log name. It's going to first look here, then it's going to look here, then it's going to look here. All right, and of course that inherits just a standard object base or object prototype. Now, if we were to use instance of, it should be true that that square, or not square, what do we use? Rect is an instance of both rectangle and shape. So I'm going to do a console log here and say rect instance of, and let's see if it's an instance of rectangle and if it's an instance of shape. And if I save that, you'll see that both of those are going to be true. Okay, it is an instance obviously of rectangle, but because we extend shape, it's also an instance of shape. All right, so that is the basics of inheritance and subclasses.